Hi, I'm Hanbit, and I'm a pastry chef from Korea. Hi everybody, it's Hanbit. 안녕하세요, 조한빛입니다. In today's video, I'm going to talk about scaling up or scaling down your recipe. I'm not going to make anything in this video, I'm just going to talk and explain. I've been getting a lot of questions on scaling up or scaling down the recipe, especially with genoise when you're using different size pans. And yes, I agree. It'll rarely be the case that you'll bake exactly the same amount as written on the recipe or use exactly the same size pan. To be honest, I scale up and down my recipe all the time, literally on a daily basis. So it's important that you understand this and apply it to your baking. I thought about how to approach this and explain this to you, and I think it's best if you split it into two categories. First case, or the first category, is when you know exactly how much you want to scale it up by. So for example, if the recipe written on the book is for 1 cookie and you want to make 2 cookies, you know exactly how much you want to scale it up by. The other case is when you're using a different size pan or a mold and you have to adjust the recipe to fit the size of that pan or the mold. And that's where it becomes slightly tricky, especially with square pans or round pans. Firstly, I'll cover the first case, when you know exactly how much you want to scale up by. Let's take my levain cookie as an example. If you take a look at the descriptions on the YouTube video, you'll see that the recipe written is for 1 levain cookie. If you want to make 2 levain cookies, you simply have to multiply everything by 2, so all the ingredients by 2. If you want to make 3 levain cookies, you will multiply all the ingredients by 3. A factor of 3, or you can call that the multiplier or the conversion factor. But you don't even need to know the words conversion factor or the multiplier. It's very intuitive. So if you're making 3 cookies, rather than using 25 grams of butter, you would use 75 grams. Rather than 8 grams of sugar, you would use 24 grams, and so on. On the other hand, if you want to make a cookie that's half the size, you will multiply everything by a half. Or you can divide everything by 2. It's the same thing. So it's not difficult at all, and it's just a matter of multiplying or dividing. Now, the second case becomes a bit tricky. I'll take my chocolate genoise as an example. I usually use a 15 centimeter diameter pan to bake my genoise. I know a lot of people work in inches, so that's around 6 inch. You can call it a 6-inch pan. I know that a lot of you use 8-inch or 10-inch pans. So how much do you need to scale up by if you're using an 8-inch or a 10-inch pan? To make this example easier, let's assume that I want to scale up from a 6-inch pan to a 12-inch pan. Does that mean that I need to double the recipe because the diameter has been doubled? And that's where a lot of people make the mistake. You need to apply the concept of area or volume. To be precise, you need to apply the concept of volume, but because the height of these pans are usually the same, you can think of it as a difference in the area. What I mean by that is that if you're using a 6-inch pan and you're scaling up to a 12-inch pan, you need to work out the difference in the volume between the two pans, right? And how do you work out the volume of a cylinder? It's base area times height. And it's the same for a cube. It's the base area times height. That's the volume. And I'll assume that the height is the same for these two cake pans. So you only have to worry about the difference in the base area. Then, how do you work out the base area of a circle? It's like going back to our math class back at school, right? It's radius times pi. So the most important idea here is that it's radius squared. It's radius times radius. So for the 6-inch pan, the base area will be 3 times pi. That'll be 9 pi. And obviously the unit will be in inch squared. For the 12-inch pan, it'll be 6 times pi. So that's 36 pi. So what's the difference? Is it twice? No, it's not. It's actually 4 times. And all of that is because when you work out the base area, it's radius times radius. It's the concept of squared. Obviously, if you're talking about pans with different height, then yes, you need to work out the total volume and compare those. So here, I've drawn up a table with the base pan being the 6-inch pan. And it shows you how much you need to multiply. So this is the multiplier or the conversion factor that you need to use for 7-inch, 8-inch, 9-inch, and 10-inch pan. So whenever you're using a different size pan, you can just look up this table. However, you still need to understand how this works because this table might not apply in some cases. I mean, I usually use a 6-inch pan to bake genoise, but you might see recipes where other people bake with 8-inch pans all the time. Then you'll have to work it out yourself. So hopefully my explanation was clear and you understand how this works. Last but not least, I know that I've been stressing the concept of squared, and that's because I'm talking about area. And the big assumption here, the underlying assumption, was that all these pans usually have the same height. And that's kind of usually the case, not always, but usually the case for genoise pans. So if you're using a 6-inch pan and an 8-inch pan, but an 8-inch pan that's actually taller than the 6-inch pan, then you actually need to bring the concept of volume and work out the total volume of the 6-inch pan, the total volume of the 8-inch pan, and look at the difference in terms of the ratio between the two. It's not difficult, it's just an extension of what I've told you today. Oh, and many of you have been asking this question as well. How should you adjust the baking time and temperature when the size of the pan changes? I'll be really honest, I don't have a perfect answer for this. Even as a professional chef, I have a rough idea, and when I mean rough idea, it means if you work on a 6-inch pan and move on to an 8-inch pan, I know that I have to bake it for slightly longer. But that's about it. Even I don't know exactly whether you need to bake for another 5 minutes or 10 minutes, etc. So if you're using a different size pan, you will need to adjust the baking time and the temperature. But if I were you, I would usually start by adjusting the time rather than the temperature. If that doesn't work, then you would need to adjust the temperature, but I usually leave the temperature alone and adjust the time. And I admit, a lot of it is down to experience. So hopefully this video was helpful and it cleared out your doubts, so you can now work out how you should scale up or scale down your recipe. Thank you very much, and I'll come back next time with another Baking 101 video. 감사합니다.